2024 was supposed to mark the resurrection of the Chicago Bears franchise, but instead it left us with more questions than answers. After what looked like a promising start to the season, this team quickly fell off a cliff. What led to the collapse of the Chicago Bears 2024 season? Well, let's get into it. The story of the 2024 Chicago Bears really begins during the 2022 offseason. This was when they hired brand new general manager Ryan Poles, who had quite an impressive resume coming into this job. Starting as a scouting assistant for the Kansas City Chiefs in 2009, and by 2021 had worked his way up to director of player personnel. His first head coaching hire was going to be a crucial one after letting go Matt Nagy after posting a 34-31 record. Out of all the candidates available, the top one the Bears fans wanted was Jim Harbaugh, but instead they went with a relative unknown.
Matt Eberflus, the former Colts defensive coordinator.
Eberflus had worked his way up from the college to the professional ranks as a coach, and in 4 years as the Indianapolis Colts defensive coordinator, he was a pretty good one, leaving the defense in a better place compared to when he got there. Bears fans figured that he would retool the defense no problem, but without question their biggest issue was going to be their offense, as they had a developing quarterback in Justin Fields. It was pretty clear during the 2022 offseason that the Chicago Bears were in rebuild mode, but at the beginning of the season they did show some flashes of promise, starting off the first 7 games of the season with a 3-4 record. And for a team rebuilding, that wasn't a bad start, but that would be the peak of their season. They went on to lose 10 straight games, ending the season with a 3-14 record. And the way they lost a lot of these games was even more frustrating. This was the beginning of Matt Eberflus either blowing leads or keeping it close, only to lose the game still at the end. Getting blown out is one thing, but when your team is consistently teasing you week after week and is not able to come through, it is extremely hard to watch. It didn't matter if the opponent was a contender or also rebuilding. A lot of their games went like that, and during the 2023 offseason, the question was, what were they going to do next, as they now held the #1 overall pick? Usually teams that land the #1 overall pick keep it and move forward with their draft, but not the Chicago Bears. They traded it to the Carolina Panthers for not only extra draft picks, but also their leading receiver DJ Moore. This was a very smart move, as it not only bolstered up their draft capital, but also they instantly improved their wide receiver room. While Justin Fields ran for over 1,000 yards in 2022, he threw for under 2,500 yards. The general thought was now he had someone to throw to, and the defense under Matt Eberflus would finally improve. And after starting the season 0-4 and extending their losing streak to 14 losses in a row, they ended up winning 7 games the rest of the way, finishing the season with a 7-10 record. But the way they lost their games was extremely painful and even set NFL records that they don't want to claim. They blew 3 double-digit fourth quarter leads, tying an NFL record. This Hail Mary attempt pretty much sums up the 2023 Bears season. Good enough to keep it close, but not good enough to pull off the victory. Something needed to change, and they did so by trading Justin Fields to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They now held the #1 overall pick from the Carolina Panthers trade, and Caleb Williams was the #1 prospect on the board. His 2022 season is one of the greatest in college football history, as he threw for over 4,500 yards and 42 touchdowns. He also scored 10 rushing touchdowns, and this was a great enough season to, of course, bring home the Heisman Trophy Award, as well as the Maxwell Award, the AP Player of the Year Award. So it was going to be hard to top that season, and in 2023, he did regress in almost every stat category, but was still the general consensus #1 overall pick that was coming to a franchise with little success of producing franchise quarterbacks. Not only was Caleb Williams being quickly viewed as the savior of the Chicago Bears, but with the extra draft picks as well as the offseason additions, there was some hype surrounding assembling this team. And of course, them doing Hard Knocks was certainly going to add to that attention, as the Bears were looking to shake the rebuilding label and make the playoffs in 2024. During training camp, you did hear some great things about Caleb Williams' development. He was able to have a very firm grasp of the offense only a couple of practices in, and day by day, the expectations continue to grow. You gotta remember, this is a franchise that has never had a 4,000-yard passing season. Along with Caleb Williams, the other most notable offseason moves were their moves in free agency, signing running back DeAndre Swift, cornerback Jalen Johnson. They also drafted an extra receiver with their extra pick in Roma Dunze, as well as another wide receiver in Keenan Allen. So you can see why some Bears fans were feeling hyped about this team entering 2024. And early in the season, there was reason to feel that way. In the first 6 games of the 2024 season, the Bears held their opponents to under 20 points a game in 5 of them. With the defense playing pretty good at times, how was the offense doing? Well, at first it was looking like the same old song and dance, as in the first 2 games they had less than 250 yards of total offense in both of them. But in the next 4 games from week 3 to week 6, you began seeing the offense making strides. During this 4-week span, they had only 1 game where they were under 300 yards of total offense, while the defense was playing lights out. But it's not like Caleb Williams was doing it on his own. You had the offseason addition of DeAndre Swift really come into its own early in the season, showing his true worth in not only the running game, but also the passing game. And of course, you can't forget DJ Moore's contribution to Caleb Williams' development, as he was making some big plays early on in the season. Really, the peak of the 2024 Chicago Bears came in both weeks 5 and 6, when they played against the Jacksonville Jaguars and Carolina Panthers. They were able to score over 30 points in both of those games, as the defense was getting turnovers and the offense was capitalizing on them. Williams went on to throw not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 passing touchdowns against the Jaguars, and it's even more impressive considering the slow start he had, as he threw less than 100 yards in his first career start. But it looked like early on that not only the offense but the defense were coming into their own at the same time. And entering the bye week at 4-2, there was a lot to be hyped about amongst Bears fans. Even though they played in an extremely tough NFC North division, the 4-2 start was very impressive to some experts. Some felt that their schedule the rest of the way was favorable enough to potentially finish out the season at 9-8 or 10-7. After the bye week, they took on the Washington Commanders, and although they gave up this easy touchdown early on, they made up for it later in the game and took the lead late. It was looking like Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears were going to get out of Washington with a victory. Take a look at this. The defense is already celebrating during the Hail Mary, but instead of the Bears getting the victory,
here comes the Hail Mary with the game on the line, and the ball is caught! Caught! It's a miracle! It's Noah Brown! Oh my goodness! It's Noah Brown!
Tyreek Stevenson was trolling Washington Commanders fans for not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 seconds before tipping the ball to them for the victory. These are the types of losses that are extremely hard to recover from, especially for a team in rebuilding. And over the next couple of games, you began to see extreme regression, as Caleb Williams was starting to be sacked more than usual. Against the New England Patriots alone, he was sacked 9 times. And in the previous game against the Arizona Cardinals, he was sacked 6 times, as in both games, the team scored less than 10 points. These performances were so bad that it was enough to fire their offensive coordinator. This firing came just in time before they began playing their divisional opponents, which resulted in extremely tough losses, as you see this missed field goal against the hated Green Bay Packers. Then you have the defense folding against the Minnesota Vikings in overtime. But while these 2 divisional losses were tough, it would not compare to what would take place on Thanksgiving Day against the Detroit Lions. After being down 16-0 at halftime against the hottest team in football, the Bears rallied back. And with less than a minute to go, the Lions now only had a 3-point lead. All they needed to do was make sure they managed the clock properly after this sack. Now that it's 3rd and 26, you can either just call the timeout now and get regrouped, or run a quick hurry-up play that'll get the team some quick yardage and into field goal range, and then you can call the timeout. Instead, this ended up happening.
You better hurry. No. Disaster in the making here. You're going to have to do something when it comes down to this play. Incomplete, and the game is over.
Why, as a professional football team, how does a coach or anybody that's responsible for calling timeouts? Why didn't you just call a timeout?
Yeah, I like what we did there. Again, once it's under 7, you're gonna call timeout there, or actually under 12, and then really you don't have an option. Because it's 3rd to 4th, you got to throw it into the end zone then. So to me, it's I think we handled it the right way.
And I think the Bears handled it the right way as well by firing Matt Eberflus a day after the game. This marked the first time in the over 100-year history of the Chicago Bears franchise that they fired a head coach during the season. And it made sense considering he completely lost the locker room after the Thanksgiving game.
Call it a powerful, ugly moment where a lot of the players, started by Jalen Johnson, had just had enough. So you have the team prayer with Eberflus, and then he starts going into his speech and whatnot. A speech that the players have heard before. And they had had enough. Like, this was it. We're not hearing this anymore. And they started yelling back at their head coach. When that happens, I don't think there's any coming back from it. It was so emotional, so passionate that Eberflus left the locker room. Probably went somewhere else in the locker room. These locker rooms have different rooms, but left the part where all the players are in it. There's no coming back from that.
With Eberflus now gone for good, this paved the way for Thomas Brown to be the interim head coach. And in his first game against the 49ers, yikes. At one point, this was the total yards for offense. So obviously, he's not going to be the head coach going in the long term. But the question is, who will be? These are some of the top candidates available, and in my opinion, the number one candidate has to be offensive coordinator Ben Johnson from the Detroit Lions. What he's been able to do with Jared Goff in that offense is extremely impressive, as he's basically revived his career. But the biggest wildcard hire would certainly be Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman, as he now has the school back in the college football playoff, but is midway through his 6-year contract. Like I said, that would be the biggest wild card. I don't know who they're going to hire, but out of all of the head coaching jobs that are currently available or will soon be, the Chicago Bears gig seems to be the most attractive. As of this upload, the Bears are currently in a 7-game losing streak, but during that span, Caleb Williams has not thrown a single interception. That's very impressive under the circumstances and proves that this guy is the quarterback of the future. But the problem the next head coaches face will be protecting their quarterback of the future. Regardless of who the next hire will be, they cannot be as bad as Matt Eberflus was when it came to blowing games, and in conclusion, they can ill afford to mess up this next hire. Doing so could not only stunt the potential growth of Caleb Williams, but also he'll sadly be wasted away on the latest Chicago Bears teams going nowhere.